It often begins with something small, a late-night craving for a glowing screen, a flash of envy when you scroll past a stranger's perfect life, a restless hunger to be more, have more, be seen more. Desire doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't pull you forward, it burrows deep inside. And slowly, almost invisibly, you find yourself no longer holding the reins of your own mind. You are driven, not guided, chasing, not choosing. You are not free. And yet, somewhere, long before algorithms and ads, there were people who saw this clearly. The Stoics, they did not seek to destroy desire, but to untangle themselves from its illusion. They stood still where others rushed forward. They questioned what others blindly pursued. So, what did they understand that we seem to have forgotten? Welcome to Stoic Dharma, where we explore ancient wisdom for modern minds. In this slow, meditative journey, we're going to look at desire not with judgment, but with clarity. We'll ask why we chase so much, yet feel so little. We'll revisit the timeless teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and others. And most importantly, we'll explore how controlling desire isn't about denial, but about discovering what is truly worth wanting. So take a breath, let your shoulders fall. Let's walk slowly through this inquiry together. Desire, at its root, is natural. It is woven into our biology: hunger, thirst, longing for safety, companionship, and meaning. But when left unchecked, when amplified by comparison, novelty, and reward, it begins to turn against us. The Stoics didn't say desire was evil. They simply asked, is it in your control? They believed that what truly makes us human is our capacity to reason with desire, not obey it blindly. Epictetus, who had once lived in chains, said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, echoed this when he wrote in his private journal, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes the color of your thoughts." Now picture yourself not in ancient Greece or imperial Rome, but in a noisy, neon-lit city. You're surrounded by choices, temptations, and messages that urge you to buy, upgrade, desire, hustle, repeat. You live in a system that thrives on the inflation of your wants. And yet, buried beneath that noise, the Stoic question remains: do you truly need what you want? Or do you simply want because others want it too? The world we inhabit is rich in stimulation, but poor in stillness. A flood of imagery adds promising transformation. Bodies sculpted to perfection, wealth flashing like trophies, creates not just desire, but a culture of insufficiency. The Stoics believed insufficiency, not through minimalism for its own sake, but through realignment. What matters is not how little you own, but how much you re-owned by what you think you need. Let's now step back. Who were the Stoics, and why did they care so much about the pool of desire? Stoicism emerged in the 3rd century BCE in the bustling, chaotic city of Athens. Zeno of Citium, a Phoenician merchant shipwrecked and lost, stumbled into a philosophy bookstore and began studying Socratic thought. From despair came the seed of Stoicism. It was never a detached theory, it was a response to inner turbulence, to anxiety, to loss, to desire run wild. Zeno, and later thinkers like Cleanthes and Chrysippus, taught that the only true good was virtue living in harmony with nature and reason. Everything else, pleasure, wealth, reputation, was indifferent, not evil, not good, simply not essential. This was a radical shift from the prevailing philosophies that celebrated indulgence or ambition. But it was Marcus Aurelius, centuries later, who would etch these ideas into quiet permanence. Ruling the vast Roman Empire, he carried a small notebook where he wrote, not as emperor, but as a student of life. In it, he reminded himself that you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. It was a philosophy shaped not in temples, but in battlefields, palaces, and sleepless nights. And then there was Seneca, the wealthy statesman and playwright, who dined with emperors and yet often practiced living like the poor. For him, Stoicism was not about rejecting life's pleasures, it was about making sure those pleasures never dictated your peace. What all these thinkers shared was a central insight. Desire often places our happiness outside of our control. And that is where suffering begins. We want more money, but markets crash. We crave affection, but people change. We dream of success, but it doesn't arrive on our timeline. In contrast, what lies within us are actions, our judgments. Our will is always ours to command. This is why Stoicism is not cold or emotionless. It is liberating. It removes the chains that desire wraps around us, not to deny us joy, but to help us reclaim it from within. Now let's take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, do I really want what I say I want? Or am I simply reacting to a world that profits from my restlessness? Marcus Aurelius warned, do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not your job to be driven like cattle by impulse. Desire often appears as freedom, but if it isn't examined, it becomes a leash. And here asks a deeper question, if I let go of chasing this thing, what part of me would remain? Would I be lesser? Or would I, perhaps, return to something more whole? The Hindu mystic spoke of Maya, the illusion that keeps us spinning in cycles of wanting. The Buddha described desire as the root of suffering, but not because it is wrong, because it is unexamined. And Epictetus, he offered a simple compass. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things. So this is not a call to reject everything. It's not about becoming ascetic or aloof. Rather, it is an invitation to observe your desires, to slow them down, to ask, is this a whisper of the soul, or a scream from the world outside? When we let go of needing more, what we gain is space. Space to choose, to breathe, to notice what has always been enough. And so, as we close this first chapter in our quiet inquiry, consider this. To control desire is not to silence life, it is to choose your own rhythm. And in that rhythm, perhaps, lies the freedom we've been searching for all along. Imagine Athens in the 3rd century BCE, the air thick with debate, the streets alive with merchants, actors, warriors, and thinkers. But underneath that energy was something else, a growing sense of disorientation. Alexander's empire had fractured, old values were breaking. People were rich in possessions, yet poor in peace. And into this world stepped Zeno of Citium, a man shipwrecked, quite literally and existentially. He began teaching not in ivory towers, but on a painted porch, the Stoical, where merchants and paupers alike could gather. The philosophy he planted would become Stoicism. And at its heart was a revolutionary idea. The path to peace does not come from fulfilling desire, but from mastering it. The Stoics didn't promise pleasure. They promised clarity. They didn't promise comfort, but calm. In an age of confusion, they invited people to turn inward, not to withdraw from life, but to anchor themselves within it. Centuries later, Rome would inherit this philosophy not through conquest, but through need. As the empire expanded, so did its anxieties. In this context, Epictetus, a former slave turned teacher, emerged. Despite his early life of constraint, Epictetus taught the most radical freedom of all, the freedom to not want what isn't yours. His classroom was humble, his tools were simple, but his teachings cut deeper than any sword. Freedom, he said, is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, would carry these ideas into the highest seat of power. Each night, he would write to himself, not to the Senate, not to history, but to the quiet voice inside. He reminded himself that desire for praise, legacy, pleasure, all of it was noise. You have power over your mind, he wrote, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Seneca, the silver-tongued Roman advisor, offered a different but equally illuminating path. He saw the dangers of excess, not just in appetite, but in ambition. His practice was unique. He would regularly sleep on the floor, eat coarse bread, and wear rough clothes not to punish himself, but to remind himself that he was more than his comforts. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. He wrote, by deliberately exposing himself to discomfort, he shrunk the power of desire. To understand Stoic control of desire, we must first understand the kinds of desires they identified. Not all were equal. Some were natural and necessary hunger, shelter, warmth. Others were natural but unnecessary rich foods, luxurious living. And then there were those that were neither natural nor necessary status, vanity, endless accumulation. The Stoics focused their energy on learning to discern, not to suppress. So, how did they actually do this? First, they practiced what's called the dichotomy of control. This is the idea that life is divided into two categories: things we can control and things we cannot. Our actions, judgments, and intentions belong to us. Everything else, reactions of others, outcomes of plans, material circumstances lie beyond our grasp. To desire what's uncontrollable is to give your serenity away. Next, they employed a technique known today as negative visualization. Seneca wrote about imagining the loss of what we cherish not to breed fear, but gratitude. Picture losing your home, your status, even your life. Not to become morbid, but to realize how little is truly needed to live well. By visualizing the impermanence of what we desire, we loosen its grip. And then there was evening reflection. Many Stoics, like Marcus, wrote at night, not to recount what they achieved but to examine what they wanted. Did I desire something unnecessary today? Was I pulled by flattery, or greed, or impatience? These nightly meditations help sharpen awareness not in judgment, but in gentle course correction. Another powerful story comes from Epictetus's classroom. He would ask his students, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. A desire, after all, is a kind of judgment that something is lacking, that you must pursue to be whole. But if your judgment is faulty, the desire loses its power, it evaporates. Let us pause here and bring these ideas into perspective. Imagine, for a moment, being able to walk through your day without needing anything from it. Not validation, not reward, just the quiet presence of being aligned with yourself. That was the Stoic goal, not to abandon the world, but to walk through it unattached. Let's now look at how each Stoic approached this goal differently. Epictetus, perhaps because of his early bondage, emphasized discipline. He believed desire should be met with inquiry. When a want arises, pause, ask, is this up to me? If not, let it go. His teachings weren't poetic but piercing. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, he said, but in having few wants. Marcus Aurelius, by contrast, offered a poetic form of detachment. Despite being emperor, he often reminded himself that all is ephemeral. He compared fame to footprints in sand and pleasure to smoke in the wind. His approach to desire was one of gentle dismissal. If something tugs at you, observe it. Let it pass. Stay rooted. Seneca's path was more nuanced. He was wealthy, influential, yet deeply aware of the trap of wanting. He often wrote about the torment of insatiability, how people chase one pleasure after another, only to grow emptier. For Seneca, philosophy was not about deprivation, but sufficiency, knowing when to say, this is enough. Despite their differences in tone, station, and style, all three offered a unified insight. To be free, we must be selective in our desires. Not all are wrong, but not all are right, either. The art is not to banish desire, but to purify it. This is the great misunderstanding. People hear Stoicism and imagine cold, austere minimalism, but that's a shadow. The real practice is more compassionate. It's learning to want wisely, want virtue, want clarity, want calm, and let go of the rest. In truth, Stoicism is less about denying life and more about making space for it. When you no longer need applause, you can speak honestly. When you no longer chase luxury, you can enjoy simplicity. When you are no longer bound by desire, You are finally free to act with intention. And so we arrive at the core of this part S teaching. Desire is not the enemy, ignorance of desire is. Once we begin to see, clearly and without judgment, the shape of our longings, we are no longer bound by them. We become, as Epictetus said, free men not because we escape chains, but because we choose what matters. As we prepare to turn the page to practical living, let us carry this reflection forward. The Stoics did not reject the world, they simply refused to be its prisoner. Picture the modern world like a wheel constantly spinning, pulling us forward with promises. New gadgets, bigger salaries, perfect vacations. Every turn says, more will make you happy, and we, like passengers on a ride that never ends, keep reaching. But somewhere between the 10th purchase and the 50th scroll, we begin to feel something unsettling, a hollow space desire could never quite fill. The Stoics noticed this long before smartphones and shopping carts. They saw that chasing more often leads to feeling less. Epictetus spoke of this when he warned, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." He was not condemning ambition, but reminding us that uncontrolled desire steals our attention from the present moment. And in the absence of presence, even abundance feels like lack. The Stoic remedy was not to retreat from life, but to reorient how we engage with it. In work, in love, and in solitude they taught a way of living that put character before craving. Let's begin with work. In most cities today, success is measured by visibility. How much recognition, how many followers, how fast the promotions come. But Marcus Aurelius approached work as a moral act, not a performance. Each morning, he reminded himself, you are not owed applause. Only your integrity is yours to keep. For the Stoics, work was an opportunity to practice virtue, diligence, patience, service. They focus not on outcomes, which are often out of our control, but on right action. Imagine setting goals not to be praised, but because they align with your inner compass. You free yourself from the highs and lows of external validation and return to the steady ground of inner purpose. Now consider relationships. Stoicism often sounds cold in this area, but look closer, and you'll see a powerful form of love, a love without possession. The Stoics did not reject connection, they rejected control. Seneca wrote, "Love is a mutual respect of each other's freedom." Instead of clinging to how people should behave, the Stoic asks, can I love them as they are, not as I wish them to be? This kind of love is not fragile, it's expansive. It leaves room for imperfections, for growth, and even for parting. When we let go of expectations, we create space for understanding. We avoid resentment, we embrace gentleness. We love not to complete ourselves, but to share what is already whole within. And then, there's the relationship with the self. This is where desire becomes most subtle, not in big purchases or status, but in the quiet craving to be someone else. To be more productive, more enlightened, more admired. The Stoics urged us to pause here, to ask, am I trying to grow, or am I just fleeing who I am right now? In our solitude, we often confront the deepest forms of desire, to escape our thoughts, to distract ourselves, to be entertained. But the Stoics welcome stillness, not as emptiness, but as rich inner terrain. Marcus wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." When we slow down, we begin to see that peace doesn't arrive with achievement, it emerges from alignment. So, how do we begin this practice? How do we loosen desire's grip? One simple tool is the evening journal. Before bed, write not what you accomplished, but what you desired. Was that longing helpful or harmful? Was it your zor borrowed from the world? Over time, this quiet inquiry builds a muscle of awareness. We begin to spot patterns. We begin to choose differently. Another practice is voluntary discomfort. Seneca encouraged occasional fasts, sleeping on hard beds, or wearing plain clothes, not to punish the body, but to remind the mind, I can live without this. Try, once a week, to eat simply, to spend a day offline, to walk without distraction. These moments aren't sacrifices, they're recalibrations. They teach sufficiency. Then there is the pause before the impulse. When a desire arises, whether for praise, sugar, or another notification, stop, breathe, ask yourself, where is this coming from? What would happen if I didn't obey it? Often, the urge passes, and in that passing, you taste a different kind of freedom. The Stoics didn't want us to suffer, they wanted us to stop suffering needlessly. And nothing brings more needless suffering than being ruled by every whim. Now let's explore the idea of intentional limits. We live in a culture that often equates limitation with lack, but the Stoics saw it differently. A life with conscious limits is a life of power. To say no to more noise, more distraction, more accumulation is to say yes to peace. He who is not satisfied with a little, said Epictetus, is satisfied with nothing. Though not a Stoic, his words echo their wisdom. Living with less is not about rejection, it's about selection, choosing what truly aligns, honoring what nourishes, and releasing what drains. In this way, every possession becomes meaningful, every moment more full. And perhaps, most importantly, we begin to feel more. When we stop chasing, we start noticing the warmth of sunlight through a curtain, the breath you didn't know you were holding, the face of someone who truly sees you. None of these require ambition, only attention. The modern world tells us we need more to be happy. The Stoics whisper back, happiness is needing less, not as deprivation, but as liberation. Imagine walking through life lightly, not burdened by shoulds, but buoyed by clarity. In every part of life, work, love, solitude, the Stoics offered a way to gently pull desire out from the driver's seat, not by shaming it, but by inviting awareness again and again. And through this practice, we return not to perfection, but to presence. There's a quiet village in the hills of northern Japan where an old man once lived alone in a wooden house facing the forest. He had once been a successful executive in Tokyo, well-dressed, well-known, well-respected. Each day, he woke before the sun, signed documents, met investors, pushed numbers across screens. Life moved fast, but somewhere along the way, in the blur of meetings and milestones, he noticed something unsettling. Despite all his gains, a strange emptiness lingered. One day, quietly, he gave it all away. His company, his property, his plans, not because he had failed, but because he had succeeded, and found nothing waiting for him on the other side. When asked why, he answered with gentle honesty, I realized the more I gained, the less I felt. And I wanted to feel again. This story may sound distant, but it isn't. It's ours. Each of us, at some point, has chased something, a title, a relationship, a moment of praise, only to discover that once we caught it, it slipped through our fingers. It wasn't the thing that failed us. It was our attachment to it, the way we clung, expected, and believed our identity depended on having it. The Stoics warned us of this trap, again and again. Marcus Aurelius, a man with the entire Roman Empire at his command, reminded himself daily, you may leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. He wasn't being morbid, he was inviting clarity. Inviting us to release our grip on the illusions we believe are permanent. So much of our suffering stems not from desire itself, but from our insistence that desire must be satisfied, that it must bend the world into shape. The Stoics didn't preach against wanting. They preached against servitude to wanting. Let's revisit what we've learned. In Part 1, we explored how modern life feeds our impulses, how advertisements, algorithms, and endless comparisons keep us in a cycle of craving. We saw how the ancient Stoics, in contrast, sought stillness not by rejecting the world, but by choosing how they responded to it. In Part 2, we studied the structure of Stoic thought. We learned how Epictetus taught the discipline of distinguishing what is and isn't in our control, how Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort to free himself from need, how Marcus Aurelius, each night, untangled his mind from praise and power, returning instead to virtue and simplicity. In Part 3, we brought the philosophy down into daily life. We looked at work, relationships, solitude. We practiced with tools journaling, intentional limits, negative visualization. We tasted what it feels like to live with less, but feel more. And now, in part 4, we complete the journey by returning to the root of it all, our attachment to outcomes. It's not wrong to want success, or love, or comfort. What the Stoics ask is this: can you want those things without depending on them for your peace? Think of desire like fire. In moderation, it warms; in excess, it burns. And if we try to cling to fire to hold it tightly, it will destroy us. So what, then, is the Stoic solution? It begins with observation without identification. You may feel the pull of desire, that's natural. But you don't have to become it, you don't have to obey it. Epictetus advised, when you are tempted by anything, consider whether giving in will bring you peace, or if resisting will make you free. The next step is detachment, not indifference. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. It means caring wisely. It means loving people without owning them, pursuing goals without being defined by them. Detachment is the art of showing up fully, but walking away lightly when the time comes. And finally, redirect desire itself. The Stoics never asked us to extinguish our longing. They invited us to aim it differently, toward virtue, toward character, toward inner freedom. Instead of craving status, crave honesty. Instead of craving praise, crave growth. When desire serves wisdom, it becomes strength. Across traditions, we hear this echoed. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, you have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work. In Buddhist teaching, clinging is the cause of suffering, not because we should reject life, but because we mistake impermanence for stability. And in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu reminds us, those who know they have enough are truly rich. All these teachings point to the same truth. Freedom begins where attachment ends. So now, let's bring it close again. Close your eyes, just for a moment. Picture the one thing you want most right now. It could be success, recognition, love, security. Hold it gently in your awareness. Don't push it away, just notice it. Now ask yourself, if I didn't get this, could I still be whole? This is not a question of giving up, it's a question of waking up. When we stop assuming that life owes us something, when we stop insisting that our desires define our worth, then even if they come, we're grateful. And if they don't, we remain grounded. The final lesson from the Stoics is not to turn your back on desire. It's to see it without illusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, receive without pride. Let go without attachment. That is the Stoic walk. Not emotionless, but emotionally free. Not sterile, but sober. Not cold, but clear. Let's imagine two people again. One clutches every opportunity, races after every desire. They are constantly anxious, constantly hoping. The other still has goals, but they are not ruled by them. They act with intention, but rest in acceptance. One is entangled, the other, free. Which would you rather be? And now we return to where we began. In a world loud with more, we have explored the quiet art of enough. In a world that rewards craving, we have remembered the wisdom of calm. You are not broken for wanting things, but you are free when you learn to want less and want well. If you wish to begin today, you don't need to renounce the world. Just start by noticing what tugs at you most, then pause, then choose. And if, as Epictetus said, you wish to be rich not in coins, but in peace, then subtract, not add. Strip away the noise, the need for attention, the myth that you are incomplete, and perhaps, beneath the weight of all that desire, you will find a simple truth: you are already whole. Thank you for walking this journey with us. See you in the next meditation.